It has been a hot minute since I have done a sit-down video, but I have got over 20 horror books in front of me today that I want to recommend you, so we'll see if I can remember how to film these. I've tried to break these into different categories. Some of them are like, you know, normal categories like gothic horror, haunted house horror, and some of them are my own little chosen categories. I love spooky season reading. I love it. It makes me happy to be sat on a cozy, cold autumnal evening. It's raining outside. I'm freaking myself out inside with the book that I've chosen to read on my own, pretty much in the dark. It's a good time all round. We're starting with the gothic horrors, which pretty much also ends up being most of the classic horrors on this list as well. First up, we have The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is the same book that the Netflix show is based off of. Still haven't watched that. I would definitely like to, so I might do that this spooky season, possibly. This is following a group of people who go and stay at a mysterious house as part of an experiment, and quickly find out that there's some quite strange, unsettling things happening. This pacing is brilliant. It completely captures you and brings you along with it and builds the tension, builds the gothic creepiness of it all. I think this is probably more sitting under like a haunted house horror, but it does definitely have a lot of elements of the gothic in there as well. I had a good time with this. It was suitably creepy and did give me goosebumps, which is always a win, I think, when you're reading something spooky. Then we have The Small Hand by Susan Hill. This book is one of the few that has actually given me the fear. I am always searching for books that are actually going to be scary. I think most of them are just atmospheric and like build the atmosphere really well, but this one did creep me out successfully for like a paragraph. This is following somebody who takes a wrong turn and accidentally discovers this like old ancient house, and there's a little hand that holds his hand in the cover here, the small hand. And ever since that happened, he starts to become like plagued with nightmares and is kind of somehow linked to this place. Very creepy, very atmospheric. The Small Hand is a creepy small hand. And finally, for the gothic horrors, the champion of gothic horror, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This book is bloody brilliant. The film, the original film, is also fantastic. This hits every nail on the head. The atmosphere, the characters, the isolation, the unsettling, the uncanny, everything about it is great. This is following our main character who marries somebody whose previous wife passed away, and she is moving to the house that they shared together and trying to become the new lady of the house. And there are a lot of people that aren't too happy about that, and there's this presence still of Rebecca, who was the first wife. It's just done so well. I really enjoyed this one. The atmosphere, it's so good. I've always loved the original film. I remember watching it with my mum when I was a kid and just being obsessed with it. The first line is, "Last night I dreamt I went to Mandalay," and I love that line as an opener. I think that's the first line of the book as well. Yeah, Mandalay, creepy house, isolated setting, great book. I like to call this next category CJ Cook, because CJ Cook is just fantastic. I absolutely love their writing so much. We have A Haunting in the Arctic by CJ Cook. This is following a group of people who go on an expedition to this ship that's going to be destroyed, a shipwreck that's going to be destroyed in the Arctic, and they're trying to poke about it to find out some things. There's some creepy stuff going on. If you like a polar horror vibe, this is it for you. It's very isolated. It's very atmospheric. It builds in a really creepy way, and I loved it. It was really good. The Ghostwoods, also by CJ Cook. This is following somebody who has been sent to this house in the middle of these woods to give birth, and it's kind of this, again, isolated, there's a running theme of isolation, this isolated place where she's kind of being squirreled away, and she digs about a little bit and discovers some stories about the history of this place, and it's all just very unsettling. This one's kind of founded in like the creepy nature woodlandy element that horror can kind of go into. I'm sure there's a word for it, but right now that's what my brain's coming up with. But this, fantastic. Again, CJ Cook just spins a very good atmospheric, creepy, slightly gothic horror. And finally from CJ Cook, The Lighthouse Witches. This is following a family, a mum and her 3 daughters, who move to a new town that's kind of weird and unwelcoming, but they're in desperate search of a home. And basically all of them bar one of the daughters goes missing, and this book is set around that time and then also 20 years in the future as one of the daughters is returning to try and work out what happened. Again, I'd say this one leans more into the gothic element of the horror and has some really interesting themes about it as well. Also, The Nesting by CJ Cook is brilliant too. Basically anything by CJ Cook. The Nesting is following a woman who gets a new job as a nanny, and weird shit starts happening. Speaking of weird shit, that is the name of this next category. This is basically anything involving things like clowns and puppets and strange things. I mean, it's clowns and puppets. That's what it is. You're probably going to guess which books I'm about to talk about now. How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. Now, this one was not my favourite Grady Hendrix book. However, it was still a very entertaining book, so I'm going to put it on here because it might be someone else's favourite. This is following a brother and sister who have to go to their parents' house to clear it out following the death of their parents, and there are loads of puppets there, and the puppets are strange and creepy and have life about them and are quite naughty puppets. So this is following this brother and sister duo, and their lives are trying to like move on from what's happened with their parents, but also these puppets just really being creepy and strange. It's very weird. I definitely have preferred other Grady Hendrix books over this one. However, it was very intriguing, and if you want to read something with puppets in it, I think this is your jam. I can't not talk about horror without mentioning at least one Stephen King book, and it has to be It for creepy shit, because Pennywise, the clown. This is a huge book. It really is, but I promise you it's so worth it. This is following a group of children who their town in Maine is haunted by this clown Pennywise every certain amount of years that I've forgotten right now. He comes back every, like, is it like 40, 30 something years? 30, 20 something? Look, he comes back. I can't really remember, but he comes back intermittently, basically, and we're following these children as they have to deal with Pennywise the clown, who is basically fear represented in a clown and is just going about killing everybody left, right and centre and representing their fears to do so. Incredibly unsettling, incredibly creepy. It's a whole journey. There is a whole journey of stuff to go on. There are a lot of trigger warnings in this book. It is also definitely aged. I will say that as well. It's very addictive. I know it's huge, but it is the kind of book that you won't really be able to put down. The next genre is slasher. This is actually one I want to read a lot more from, and on Wednesday, not that it matters what day it is to you, in a few days' time from filming this vlog, I'm going to be buying some more horror books, filming my horror book shopping in Oxford vlog, and there are 2 slashers on my list that I want to pick up. So I've only got 2 in this category, but it is growing. So we've got You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Bayron. This is a camp slasher, which, I want like kind of camp slasher vibes. That is what I want from these books. This one just nails it. It's very short, so it's very intense, but it's following somebody who works at a camp recreating like a fake slasher film thing, and then finds themselves in a real slasher situation in the camp. I love the idea that this is kind of meta in itself, that it's talking about the slasher genre and then it becomes the slasher genre. It's great fun. It's very addictive, very tense. I mean, anything this short when you've got that kind of an intense of a plot is going to be a lot. It's just great. I really enjoyed it. You can't talk about slasher books without mentioning The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This was so much fun. This is very meta in the sense that it acknowledges the final girl trope actively in this book. It's following a group of people who have all been the final girls in their own like horror story trauma situation, and they are slowly being picked away from the support group and being killed, and our main character is trying to find out what's happening and stop it before it progresses. I love this. I love the meta acknowledgement of the trope and how it kind of feeds into that, and how clever Grady Hendrix's writing style is. You can tell Grady Hendrix just absorbs horror from the way this is written. I think if you are a horror fan, either in books or films, then this is definitely going to be for you, because it just pulls in so much to it. The build-up, the pacing, the characters, everything about this is excellent. I love it so much. I will always recommend this one. It's definitely very different from Grady Hendrix's other books, but I love it. Next up, we have got Haunted House, starting with White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. This book is, again, one of the few books to actually give me the fear. This was creepy as hell. This is following a family who moved to a new town that's like a development that's being created. I think they moved there for work. I can't remember. It's been a couple of years since I read it. I think they moved there for work. So it's quite isolated, again. The running theme of these books, shockingly. It's quite isolated, no one else has moved in yet, so they're the first people to experience this new neighbourhood that's been built, and our main character starts to realise there's some really creepy things happening in the house. And it gets creepier and creepier. This is the kind of book where you want to read it with the lights on. Unless you really want to scare yourself, then read it with the lights off. But you have been warned. I just love this. The atmosphere, the tension, the unsettling feeling of it all. Excellent. Haunted house, haunted hotel. kind of the same thing. We're gonna go for it. This is The Shining by Stephen King. I think most people probably have heard of this in some capacity or another, whether it's through the book or the film. This is following a family who moved to look after a hotel. The husband is the caretaker of the hotel and he's looking after it over the winter period, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they moved in just before winter, and winter basically closes them off. There's a storm, it isolates them again. And the hotel is not quite what it seems. They very much develop cabin fever, and that starts to play with them, and it's just a pretty intense place to be staying. Stephen King's writing style is so stylized that you can spot a Stephen King book from a mile off from reading a couple of sentences from it, and I love that about his writing style. It's definitely very distinct, it's definitely not for everyone, but I love the matter-of-fact way he goes about describing things, because in a horror, like, you know, you can build it and it can be quite flowery and atmospheric, and I think that can really build the suspense. But Stephen King is just like, this is what is happening, this is what is in front of you, this is why it's scary, and he just kind of shows you everything immediately. Not immediately in terms of, like, the horror, you know, there's still build and tension and stuff, but once something is there, you know what it is that's there, and you know, like, you can see it so clearly in your head because of his descriptions. If you are a fan of the film, definitely pick up the book for this. And finally, for Haunted House, we have got the Amityville Horror by Jay Anson. This is following a family who move into a house and 28 days later flee from that house because it was creepy as hell. There is a lot of weird stuff that goes on in this book. They wake up at the same time every night to weird stuff happening. My mum read this, well, actually, my mum read a bit of it and couldn't finish it because it creeped her out so much, and told me that she woke up, I can't remember what time it is, they wake up like 3 something in the morning, 3:14 or something, and she said she woke up at that time every night for a while after reading this when she was a teenager, which is what made me want to pick it up. It's definitely very creepy. It wasn't necessarily the scariest book, but it definitely built and had strange things and was very unsettling, so this one. I feel like this is like the most haunted house out of the 3 I've recommended. Like, this is more of the typical genre of creepy big haunted house. You can't have horror without having a couple of creepy children, so this next category is creepy kids. First up, we have Sour Candy by Keelan Patrick Burke. This is absolutely miniature. This is also so strange. This is following a man who finds a child at the supermarket, or maybe more, the child finds him, and suddenly this child is like saying that he's his dad and that he just comes home with him and like lives with him, and suddenly this is his child, and it's like completely out of nowhere, and it kind of just breaks apart his whole entire life in a really creepy way. It's really strange and unsettling, trust me. It's really, really weird. It's just the idea of like this kid just implanting himself into this life and being like, yeah, this is my existence, I'm a part of your life, and how much that just tears everything else apart for our main character. Really strange, really unsettling. Give it a go. Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. I don't even know what to begin to tell you about this book. I read this last year, which was a great achievement because it's freaking massive. This is following a family who move to a new town and weird stuff is happening. Specifically centered around the children in this book, hence the creepy children vibe. And I don't really feel like I can tell you much more than that because I don't want to tread on any spoilers, but trust me, this is intense, it's strange, it builds, it's got the atmosphere, it is chunky, but it will keep you hooked because you will be invested in whatever the hell is happening to these children. And again, I feel like with anything that's centric around children, the same with it and stuff, you're always kind of yelling of like, why are more adults not getting involved in this? And I think you will yell that a little bit at this book as well. I really enjoyed it, obviously. Don't let the size put you off. It's a really good one. And finally, for creepy children, we have My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I'm kind of bordering on children here because I can't remember how old the main characters are. They're high school sophomores, so they're teenagers. This is following somebody who gets possessed and their best friend tries to exorcise them? I don't think that's the right, exorcise them. They try to perform an exorcism on them, and this is all about the build-up to getting to that point. Obviously the cover, the title tells you that that is what is happening, but they do a lot of weird shit in the middle of that happening, and just progressively the person that's possessed becomes worse and worse and worse and tries to bring everybody else down with them, and it's just weird and unsettling and strange and will make you feel quite uncomfortable reading certain chapters that I can still really strongly visually see in my head, probably because I then watched the film after reading this and it's just really solidified everything. There's some gross stuff. It's a gross book, but it's a good book with creepy teenagers, creepy children. Of course, it would be rude not to also talk about books with creepy adults. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Have I just chucked every Grady Hendrix book on this list. Yeah, I think I might have pretty much, to be honest. This is following a character who loves going to her book club. It's somewhere she just feels like she can just be, and she feels good. It's her safe place. And then suddenly everything's kind of interrupted by the arrival of this man who everyone seems to really love. She's a bit suspicious of him, and then children start going missing. So, you know, she kind of does a little bit of digging, poking around, and finds out some stuff about him. Obviously this is very vampire-y. It's definitely got strong 90s vibes to it. I love the way that Grady Hendrix just kind of throws you into a decade and does it so well. This is actually the first Grady Hendrix book that I read, and whilst it isn't my favourite Grady Hendrix, obviously that is the Final Girl support group, I did really enjoy this, and I think it was a really good entryway into his writing. So if you're fancying something that is small town, unsettled by arrival of man, give this one a go. Okay, this next one, I promise it's the last Grady Hendrix book. It's Horror Store. I've put this in creepy adults because there are creepy adults in this book. It's not the whole centric plot of it, but there's some creepy stuff happening. This is so cleverly laid out as well. It's like an IKEA catalogue. I love it. It's so clever. Like, the start of each chapter gives you a different breakdown as to how to make furniture, but the furniture gets progressively more, like, torturous as it goes on. This is following a group of people who have to work a night shift at their local, not IKEA shop, and strange stuff happens when they work the night shift. Again, there was a paragraph in this that gave me the fear, that gave me the goosebumps, and was very unsettling, and something that I did definitely want to read with the lights on. I think the format of this just makes it feel even more fun because it does feel like you're literally being immersed into it, and it's just clever because it is kind of a haunted house vibe, but in an IKEA, not IKEA shop, which is just funny and silly and weird and brilliant, and I think is one of the reasons I love Grady Hendrix, because he just kind of takes something and flips it and does it in a really brilliant way, but it still reads like, you know, it doesn't read like this is absolutely bizarre and the weirdest thing I've ever read. It just kind of makes sense. And finally, for creepy adults, is actually the book I'm currently reading, which is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kleiwer. This could also go under haunted house. However, I'm going to keep it in creepy adult. This is following somebody who has just moved into a new house with her partner. They are like just renovating and trying to do work on the house, and when her partner is out, she gets a knock on the door from somebody who says he used to live there and could he show his children around the house. She lets them in and they basically just don't leave, and weird stuff happens, including her partner going missing and her kind of losing touch on reality. This is all in the blurb, so it's not spoilery. The family that have come in, I mean, I'm literally like 50 pages into it, but the family that have come into it, they seem normal at the moment, but they also seem really nonchalant about so many things, and she's kind of like, well, this doesn't feel quite right. They're not really questioning things that should be questioning, and it's a bit strange, and she's getting the heebie-jeebies about them at the moment. But I assume the family are going to gradually show their true colours. Like, you know, usually when you meet someone in a horror that's trying to lure you in, they're the nicest person you've ever met, and then they become creepier and creepier. So, creepy adult. This has got the potential to scare me. I think I've heard a lot of people say this is creepy, so I'm excited. I have been reading it at night exclusively, not deliberately, but it definitely has been building that atmosphere and has me a little bit like looking around the corner before I leave the room. And the final category is Miscellaneous, because I didn't know where to put these, but I still wanted to include them in the video. The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. I will just touch on this one because I talk about this a lot. This is one of my all-time favourite books. This is following a sister whose daughter, a sister whose younger sister went missing when they were children, and she has returned to the area her sister went missing to try and investigate it. At the same time, we are seeing a man who lives on that street who's acting quite strange, and feels like he's got something to hide. It's so weird, and it's so brilliant, and it's so tense. You will be on the edge of your seat reading this. I absolutely bloody loved it. It's so strange with the way that it reveals the story, and so intense, you will be just screaming at it. I can't really say much more than that, but I absolutely love this book, and I can't recommend this one highly enough. HeartShaped Box by Joe Hill. If you want like a kind of rocker horror, then this is your thing. This is following a musician who buys a ghost on the internet, and that ghost arrives on his door in a heart-shaped box and causes terror. You know, I don't really know what he expected, but they go on a whole journey here to try and shift this ghost, and we get to find out a lot about the main character and his past and everything that's led him to this point. It's quite a good character building one at the same time as being a suspenseful horror, because I think sometimes with horror you sacrifice the build of the character to build the atmosphere and the setting instead, but I think this does both quite well, and it's a little bit different. The pacing is quite interesting, and I love the fact that we get the music behind it as well, like because of his history, you know, you have that kind of a theme running through it too. It's a good time. It's silly and funny at the same time as being tense and a lot of high stakes. All Hallows by Christopher Golden. I read this one on Halloween last year, and I recommend anyone to do the same thing. This is set on Halloween night. It's on a street in which somebody, like one family, puts up a huge haunted house every year, or like a haunted garden. People love it, and I think this is their last year of doing that haunted garden thing. You're seeing different families on this street as well at the same time. It's kind of like a little bit like an episode of Desperate Housewives. You get to go in to see all of the different families, all of the drama that's happening, and at the same time as all this happening, there is a few children that have just randomly appeared on this street that are not really meant to be there and have a little bit of a creepy backstory going on that introduces the horror element on top of this Halloween setting. I love it. I love the fact that it's set on Halloween and we've got everyone dressed up and the atmosphere is already built immediately because of that setting, and then throw in these creepy children. This could have been in Creepy Children. Oh well. Creepy Children, honorary mention. You just throw that all together. You've got yourself a pretty addictive Halloween night read. I think it's a really good one to read as close as Halloween to as close to Halloween as you possibly can. And finally, we have Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This book is so strange. This is following a town that has become obsessed with spirals. Spirals start to take over this town. People become obsessed with it, and that obsession takes place in various different ways. And it's really strange. It's so weird. I mean, I'll flick to a page near the front so you can kind of see how strange it is. In fact, I don't even need to do that much. Look at the end pages. It's so weird. So yeah, I'm not really going to say much more about this. If you want something really strange, it's a graphic novel, so you will get the strangeness in a very visual format. Pick this up. Hey look, I remembered how to do a sit down video. Thank you for watching my horror book recommendations video. That was a splurge of horror, but I hope you found something to enjoy and read. I have got a lot on my list that I'm going to try and buy this week, so likely there will be more to add to this. I will be doing a haul in that video, so I don't know if it's live by the time you're watching. Regardless, there is a video either live or coming soon in which I'm going to be doing some horror book shopping and adding more to this list, I'm sure. But thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Oh, also, if you have any books to add to this list, please let me know in the comments, because I'm always looking to grow my horror collection.